longest ban you'll ever read, Part 2. Let us get to the point, to the real deal. As I already told you, the campaign will be set in our world, 1850 England. But in this setting, both magic and monsters are real. However, there is no difference between the setting and the reality of the real-life 1850, as magic and monsters are relegated to legend by commoners. The campaign will be low magic horror investigative. We begin from level 1 and the DM warns us there will be restrictions applied to our PCs. Now, I'm not going to use the word railroad, not even once. So if you get that feel from now on, that assumption is entirely on you. Said restrictions include, but are not limited to, I may have forgot something. 1. Only the core rulebook, plus the gunslinger, from Ultimate Combat, are allowed. Any other class is not. In an investigative campaign, you cannot play the investigator. Samurais and ninjas are not allowed. In a setting where the Edo period Japan exists, samurai and ninjas do not. You cannot multi-class. This obviously precludes any prestige class, but it's interesting to note that when I question why the specific limitation in Pathfinder multi-classing is typically ill-advised, the DM answered me, because in Pathfinder, multi-classing is such a mess, with all those abilities that cross. To date, I still have absolutely no idea on what the hell he was talking about. Maybe he was referring to the variant multi-classing rule found on Pathfinder Unchained. But who knows? 4. Any option from whatever other rulebook could potentially be considered by the DM, but basically, it's a no to everything. This also includes rules and options from horror adventures. The rulebook the DM used is cornerstone for the entire campaign. It's like playing in the Farron, but you can only use the player's handbook, while Forgotten Realm rulebooks are banned. All of the classes from the core rulebook are allowed. However, magical classes will have even more restrictions, both on rules and role-playing. About the latter, your PCs will believe magic is originated from the power of God, or something along those lines. I'm not even going to touch this one. 6. Speaking about magic restrictions, all of the following spells, or any ability that can replicate the effects, are automatically banned. Any teleport spell that can target objects. Any teleport spell that can target creatures. Any mind-affecting spell. Any spell that might compel someone to do anything against his will, whenever it allows a saving throw or not. Any spell that allows you to scry or enter someone else's mind in any way, shape, or form. Any spells that allows you to read other people's mind or gather information from any source. Basically 3/4 of all divination spells. Any spells that can manipulate or move objects in any way, shape, or form. Any spells that can damage objects from the distance. Debuff spells can last some hours at best, regardless of what the rulebook says. For instance, casting blindness on an enemy will make him blind for some hours. If someone casts it on us, it is permanent as usual. With that said, it is important to note that enemy NPCs do not have those limitations. We cannot cast a charm person spell on an enemy, but said enemy could cast it on us. Moreover, we cannot even try a counterspell, as we don't even have charm person on our list. I'll have you notice the ban list spell list also includes Message, Prestidigitation, Acid Splash, Ray of Frost, and Read Magic. Summon monster spells are not banned because moving a key from a distance with Mage Hand breaks the game. Summoning an eagle to do the same does not. Surprisingly, the DM's girlfriend playing a druid have nothing to do with that. 7. Common language is actually English. Every other fantasy language, like Elvish or Draconic, exists. But if you want to speak French, Italian, or Spanish, you have to spend points. Base races are allowed, but everyone in the setting believe they are human. This includes elves, dwarves, gnomes, and half-orcs. One might wonder who actually speak Dwarven if dwarf kingdoms and relative culture never existed, or why nobody wonders on humans with pointy ears living 10 times longer than regular-eared humans, or why humans affected by achondroplegia, have innate magical powers regardless of magic being only a legend. Some individuals of those races know how they are not just some atypical humans, but they are considered insane by the rest of society, even if they got palpable proof on their true nature. 9. The campaign will be a good-oriented one, not in the usual sense that you can play good or neutral alignments, and if you want to play evil, you have to keep it hidden from other players / have an agreement with the DM. Instead, only the 3 good alignments are available, and you cannot switch them in-game. 10. Playable characters, all of them, must have a phobia. It is not an option, nor will be counterbalanced by some bonus, like flaws in D&D. You must have some sort of irrational fear the DM can exploit to crush you on your knees every time he desires. I picked calgenophobia, fear of beautiful women. 11. Playable characters, all of them, have to be humans. And by humans, I mean, if you encounter a monster, you must get scared. You cannot roleplay a stoic warrior, a cold-minded ranger, an airhead bard who try to smile even in the most desperate situations, or a courageous paladin, who, by the way, is immune to fear as per rulebook. When you witness a spell or magical creature, your one and only roleplay interpretation can be wonder followed by fear, even if it is the 7th time you saw such performance in the very same day. 12. You can only invest skill points in class skills, or the ones that can be used untrained. For example, everyone can invest points in acrobatics, but only someone playing a class of spellcraft as a class skill can invest points in spellcraft. If you're a fighter and want to invest in use magic device to be more useful, you cannot. Moreover, since you cannot multi-class either, or even gain new skills from rules / feats from whatever rulebook, shame on you. Since I considered it very weird, I questioned the DM about this restriction too. The DM answered me this wasn't on him, but rather the rulebook that says so. Needless to say, the rulebook does not say so. Nevertheless, even after showing him the actual pages of the rulebook, nothing changed. 13. We use the luck skill. In theory, a d20 roll for every time a player tries to achieve something not specified on the rulebook. In practice, a d20 roll for every time the DM doesn't bother to open said rulebook. Do you want to perform a coin trick? The rulebook would suggest to use the sleight of hand skill, but since the DM doesn't know / doesn't remember, let's do a luck roll. And goodbye kiss to any skill points invested, dexterity bonus, or anything else. 14. The DM has the final word on abilities and skill DCs. You may think it's the same as any other campaign, but here it's a little different. Here is more intended than that. Say you want to cross a rift with an acrobatics check. You want to be able, regardless if you scored a 35 on said check, because the DM does not want you to proceed in that direction. The campaign will be slow. How slow? Well, apparently, last time the DM ruled a campaign, in the same setting, the players are stuck at level 1 for almost a year. A real-life year, with an average of 1 session per week. Have you ever heard about the E6 system? Basically, this is the E1 version. 16. At first level, player characters begin with the maximum of the hit die as their initial hit points. Starting from the second level, you roll the hit dice and add the Constitution modifier. No, I didn't write it wrong. At first, for whatever reason, you don't get the usual bonus for your high Constitution score. Moreover, considering you basically never level up, This makes the Constitution a dump stat. 17. You will have the rulebook's average starting character wealth for your class. You know, the usual 105 gold for a barbarian, 140 gold for a rogue, and so on. Everything else you should start with, like a familiar or the gunslinger battered firearm, must, however, be granted by the DM, if he deems appropriate. I shall remind you that this is a low magic campaign, so you can just forget about health potions or wands or, hell, even magic item shops. Weirdly enough, the weight of your equipment doesn't need to be properly noted, as one would expect. You should just not exaggerate too much on packing stuff. 18. The DM may deem unrealistic some rules, and therefore not use them. For example, the treat deadly wounds option of the heal skill is considered unrealistic and thus not allowed to the players. So to speak, basic first aid practices are unrealistic, but landing from a 30 feet fall with no damage thanks to a good acrobatics roll totally is. 19. Combat maneuvers like bull rush, disarm, or trip will be simplified as such. You roll 1d20 plus CMB, BAT, plus strength plus size against the opponent, which in turn will roll 1d20 plus CMD, 10 plus BAT, plus strength plus dexterity plus size. If you roll higher, you succeed in whatever maneuver you're trying. If you cannot spot what's the problem, here it is. Normally, you would roll your 1d20 plus CMB, but you only need to beat your opponent's CMD, but no defensive roll. Also, individual maneuvers have specific variables, like dwarf stability trait, yet the DM's idea of Simplify is actually to trash all and any variable and add a free d20 to the defender. As a result, having roughly the same level in scores, if you want to perform any combat maneuver against someone, with your d20, you need to beat your opponent d20 roll on top of his dexterity bonus plus 10. Either your average d20 roll is an 18, or you can forget about any tactical combat option. 20. Grapple has been simplified so much to cease to exist, basically. Forget about grappling a spellcaster to impede his cast, or to pin someone to facilitate your rogue friend's sneak attacks. The whole grapple option has been reduced to, if you can beat your opponent's CMD, plus the aforementioned d20, you can stop him for one turn. What does stop him for one turn mean is yet to be disclosed. I want to clarify a thing. The DM did provide us a PDF containing all the restrictions I mentioned before. 26 pages PDF to be precise. But he actually sent it a few days before the actual character creation process. Which means during the one-shot weeks, to each of my proposals for my future characters, I saw a new limitation slamming into my face. One new restriction for any of my choices. Me. I would like to play a tactical fighter. DM. Fine to me, but we use a simplified version of the combat maneuvers. Me. I could play a Blood Rager. It looks interesting. DM. It's not on the core rulebook. Also, it does not integrate well with the setting. Me. For the race, I was thinking about a Wavarian. I have always wanted to try something like that. DM. I could allow that race, but you would be hunted by everyone because they would mistake you for a demon. Me. Since no one wants to play the heal bot, I could invest some skill points in heal, and thus, by selecting the healer's hands, feet, I could use the first aid rules to help with healing. It should be very fitting considering we're in a low magic setting. DM. No. Heal skills is unrealistic. I won't allow that use. Me. What if I play an investigator with a psychic detective archetype? This way it shouldn't bother you with unrealistic alchemical extracts. DM. I could allow that, but spells have some limitations. Also, alchemical extracts are not unrealistic, unlike the first aid. me. Considering the setting, I was thinking about starting this cynical, neutral character, which will slowly become good over the course of the campaign. DM. No, you're good. End of discussion. It is worth noting that exchanges happen like 2 to 3 times per session over the one-shot period. But regardless of how many new restrictions popped up every single time, the final PDF yet contained even more. After all of that, one evening, we finally create the actual characters. And one more surprise awaits us. The DM created the character sheet layout. I bet some of you may think, oh, that's so sweet of him. But sadly, I'm a pragmatic individual, and I only care about the final result. How's the final result, you ask? As expected, total bullcrap. The part for the languages was so small, we've mistaken it for a graphical decoration. The space for the feats only had 6 slots in total. At least 1/4 of one of the 2 pages was dedicated to the essential character portrait panel. The part for the spells was minimal and didn't have the usual table for the spells per day. In the equipment part, you have more space for writing down the weight of a given item rather than the actual item name. And finally, in the whole sheet, we're missing the special/class features part. Just like we are also missing the sheet for an animal companion or familiar. I begged the DM to let us use a normal character sheet, but once again, it was denied because it is better this way. In any case, I chose a gunslinger, and for the race, I was miraculously able to convince the DM to let me play Kitsune. For those who don't know, it is basically an anthropomorphic fox that can shapeshift, if you select the feat for it, into the individuals it's already met. So to speak, a lesser version of the changelings from the Everon setting. But the DM told me not to abuse my character and not break the game. In the same party, we have a slayer, a druid, and a cleric. How can a level 1 shape changer break the game even more than a druid or cleric could potentially be able to do is yet to be known. As often happens in these cases, we weren't able to complete the sheets in one run. Mainly because every time we laid the pencil on the paper, the DM informed us about a new homebrewing/restriction/ban. So we are going to finalize next week. In between those sessions, however, the DM dropped the nuke. He texted us that our backgrounds will have restrictions too. The first and most important is none of us ever witnessed one of these magical creatures from the legends. In other words, we are all fasting on any knowledge whatsoever regarding the supernatural, including the cleric who can cast spells, the druid who can cast spells, and owns a talking cat, don't ask, and the shape-shifting kitsune. So, the cleric knows the magic is real and can harness it, but yet believes magical creatures don't exist. Which is basically like saying that you don't believe in aliens, regardless of the fact that there's a flying saucer parked in your lawn every other day. So throughout the whole chapter, which is what this is chapter 2 in part 1 of the longest ban list, it's began to become clear that the DM made these restrictions possibly to create a story, but he was definitely railroading. The DM was definitely railroading the whole campaign, and if we're honest with all these restrictions, he's ruining the biggest thing people like about RPGs, and that's the creativity that you as a player can have. There was one that I like, and the only one I can say that for is the phobias. I think it's something that would be interesting, because it does seem like a lot of people make their characters afraid of nothing, just fighting everything they see. Like, I feel like most forget that normal people wouldn't go out and fight a bear just because it's there. But in D&D or Pathfinder, it seems like they see anything and they go and attack it. But this is the only rule I think would be interesting. There shouldn't be this many restrictions on a player's creativity. And there will be a lot more parts to this one. So let me know what you think, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. And I'll see you next time.